Remember when every country grandmother knew how to make church potluck desserts that actually mattered? These humble, heartfelt sweets became famous across the entire country, filling fellowship halls with joy. Then convenience baking arrived, and one by one, these beloved desserts started vanishing from our tables, our cookbooks, and our collective memory. Let's rediscover what we lost. 30 forgotten church potluck desserts that some of us still remember before they vanished. Sour cream. Raisin pie was the most requested dessert at Midwestern church suppers throughout the 1950s through 1970s, featuring plump raisins cooked in a sweet, tangy sour cream custard filling that was unlike any other pie on the table. Country grandmas made this by simmering raisins with sugar, cinnamon, cloves, and a little vinegar until they plumped up and released their sweetness, then stirring in sour cream, beaten egg yolks, and a pinch of nutmeg to create a thick, creamy filling. The mixture was poured into a pre-baked pie shell and topped with fluffy meringue beaten to stiff peaks, then browned in the oven until the tips turned golden. The combination of sweet raisins and tangy sour cream created a complex flavor that kept people coming back for seconds at every church potluck. Today, this beloved pie has completely vanished from fellowship halls, and most people under 50 have never even heard of it. Lane cake was the crown jewel of Southern church potlucks in the 1950s and 1960s, a towering 4-layer white cake filled with a rich bourbon-spiked filling made from egg yolks, butter, sugar, raisins, pecans, and coconut. Country grandmas in Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi made this cake for special occasions like homecoming, Sunday, and Christmas dinners, and the recipe required serious skill and patience. The cake layers were delicate white sponge made with beaten egg whites, folded carefully into the batter, baked until golden, then cooled completely before assembly. The filling was cooked on the stovetop like custard, stirring constantly until thick enough to spread, then mixed with chopped raisins, toasted pecans, shredded coconut, and a generous splash of bourbon or brandy for that signature grown-up flavor. The assembled cake was frosted with fluffy white icing and presented on a cake stand in the fellowship hall, where it drew admiring looks before the first slice was cut. Today, Lane cake has almost completely disappeared except in a few old Southern cookbooks. Watergate salad was the bright green dessert salad that appeared at every church potluck throughout the 1970s, made with just 5 ingredients: pistachio instant pudding mix, crushed pineapple, mini marshmallows, chopped pecans, and Cool Whip. Country grandmas loved this recipe because it required no baking, came together in minutes, and always disappeared from the dessert table first. The pistachio pudding mix gave it that distinctive pale green color and nutty flavor, while the crushed pineapple added sweetness and moisture, and the marshmallows provided chewy texture contrast. The salad was stirred together in a large bowl, chilled in the refrigerator for at least 2 hours to let the flavors meld, then served in a cut glass bowl that had been passed down through generations. The name Watergate came from the political scandal of the early 1970s, though nobody could quite explain why this innocent dessert carried such a notorious name. Today, Watergate salad has been completely forgotten, relegated to jokes about retro food rather than recognized as the legitimate church potluck staple it once was. Before we move on, many of you asked in the comments where to find these recipes. We even received tons of email, too, so we published these recipes on our website. The link is in the description. Let's continue. Pig Pickin' cake was the mandarin orange sheet cake that dominated Southern church potlucks and outdoor picnics throughout the 1970s and 1980s, named because it was traditionally served at whole hog barbecues where people picked at the meat. Country grandmas made this by baking a yellow cake mix with vegetable oil, eggs, and an entire can of mandarin oranges with their juice folded right into the batter, creating an incredibly moist, citrus-scented cake. The cake was baked in a 13 by 9 pan, cooled completely, then topped with a fluffy frosting made from crushed pineapple instant vanilla pudding mix and Cool Whip that was spread thick across the top. The combination of sweet oranges in the cake and tropical pineapple in the frosting created a refreshing dessert perfect for hot summer church picnics and Sunday dinners. The cake stayed moist for days and traveled well in the pan, making it ideal for potluck contributions. Today, pig pickin' cake has vanished from most church tables, remembered only by those who grew up in the South during its heyday. Lemon Lush was the show-stopping layered dessert that appeared at church potlucks throughout the 1970s and 1980s, featuring 4 distinct layers: a pecan shortbread crust, a cream cheese layer, a lemon pudding layer, and a Cool Whip topping. Country grandmas made this in a 13 by 9 glass dish, so the beautiful layers showed through the sides, and it required no baking except for the crust. The bottom layer was made from flour, chopped pecans, and melted butter pressed into the pan and baked until golden, then cooled completely. The second layer was softened cream cheese beaten with powdered sugar and Cool Whip until fluffy and spread carefully over the crust. The third layer was lemon instant pudding mixed with cold milk until thick, then spread over the cream cheese layer. The final layer was more Cool Whip spread on top and garnished with additional chopped pecans or lemon zest. The dessert had to be refrigerated for several hours before serving to let the layers set properly, and cutting perfect squares with all 4 layers intact was considered a sign of a skilled church cook. Today, Lemon Lush has completely disappeared from fellowship halls. These 5 church potluck desserts, sour cream raisin pie, lane cake, Watergate salad, pig pickin' cake, and Lemon Lush, were the most popular desserts that country grandmas brought to fellowship halls throughout the 1950s through 1980s. Today, they've completely vanished, replaced by store-bought desserts and modern convenience foods. Let's continue before more are forgotten. Strawberry pretzel salad was the salty, sweet layered dessert that became an absolute icon of church potlucks in the 1970s and 1980s, featuring a pretzel crust, cream cheese middle, and strawberry jello top layer. Country grandmas made this by crushing pretzels and mixing them with melted butter and a little sugar, pressing the mixture into a 13 by 9 pan and baking until set. The middle layer was softened cream cheese beaten with sugar and Cool Whip until fluffy, spread carefully over the cooled pretzel crust, making sure to seal it all the way to the edges so the jello wouldn't seep through. The top layer was strawberry jello mixed with boiling water, then cold water and frozen strawberries stirred in until the berries separated and the mixture started to thicken before being poured over the cream cheese layer. The dessert chilled in the refrigerator overnight until the jello set firm and the layers melded together into something magical. The salty crunch of pretzels, the creamy tang of cheese, and the sweet fruit of strawberries. This dessert always sparked debates about whether it was a salad or a dessert, but everyone agreed it was delicious. Today, strawberry pretzel salad has largely vanished from church tables. 7-Up pound cake was the towering bundt cake that became a church potluck staple from the 1950s through the 1980s, made famous by a promotional recipe booklet distributed by the 7-Up Company in 1953. Country grandmas made this by creaming 3 sticks of butter with 3 cups of sugar for 12 full minutes until the mixture was pale and fluffy. Then adding 5 eggs one at a time, beating well after each addition. The secret was using 7-Up soda instead of any leavening agents, no baking powder or baking soda, just the carbonation from the soda to make the cake rise. 3 cups of flour were added alternately with 1 cup of 7-Up and a tablespoon of lemon extract, mixed gently to keep the bubbles intact, then poured into a greased and floured bundt pan. The cake baked at 325 degrees for over an hour until a toothpick came out clean. Then cooled in the pan for exactly 10 minutes before being turned out onto a plate. The glaze was powdered sugar mixed with more 7-Up drizzled over the warm cake so it soaked into every ridge. Today, 7-Up pound cake has vanished along with the church mothers who knew the exact timing required to make it rise properly. Sock It to Me cake was the Duncan Hines cake mix sensation that appeared on every church potluck table from the mid-1960s through the early 2000s, featuring a cinnamon pecan ribbon swirled through the center of a dense yellow bundt cake. Country grandmas made this by mixing a Duncan Hines butter recipe golden cake mix with sour cream, vegetable oil, sugar, and eggs until smooth, then pouring half the batter into a greased bundt pan. The signature swirl was made from brown sugar, cinnamon, and chopped pecans mixed together and sprinkled over the first layer of batter. Then the remaining batter was poured on top to cover it. During baking, then the cinnamon pecan mixture would sink slightly and create those beautiful dark ribbons when you sliced the cake. The finished cake was turned out onto a plate and drizzled with a simple powdered sugar glaze while still warm. The name "Sock It to Me" came from the popular phrase used on the TV show Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In the late 1960s, and the cake became so popular that Duncan Hines eventually put the recipe right on the box. Today, Sock It to Me cake has disappeared as cake mix formulas changed and the distinctive flavor can no longer be replicated. Grasshopper pie was the cool, creamy mint dessert that dominated church potlucks throughout the 1960s and 1970s, featuring a chocolate cookie crust filled with bright green mint filling made from crème de menthe liqueur. Country grandmas made this by crushing Oreo cookies into fine crumbs, mixing them with melted butter, and pressing the mixture into a pie pan to create a dark chocolate crust. The filling was made by beating softened cream cheese with powdered sugar until fluffy, then folding in whipped cream and green crème de menthe liqueur that gave the pie its distinctive mint flavor and pale green color. Some church versions left out the alcohol and used mint extract with green food coloring instead, but the flavor was never quite the same. The pie was poured into the crust, smoothed on top, and frozen until firm, then served partially thawed so it had a creamy, almost ice cream-like texture. The combination of chocolate cookie crust and cool mint filling was refreshing after heavy church dinners. Today, grasshopper pie has completely vanished from fellowship halls, considered too retro and too labor-intensive for modern potlucks. Orange creamsicle. Kool-Aid pie was the impossibly easy, no-bake pie that church grandmas made throughout the 1970s and 1980s using just 4 ingredients: orange Kool-Aid powder, sweetened condensed milk, Cool Whip, and a graham cracker crust. Country grandmas loved this recipe because it came together in 5 minutes and tasted exactly like an orange creamsicle ice cream bar. The filling was made by stirring orange Kool-Aid powder directly into a can of sweetened condensed milk until the mixture turned bright orange and the powder dissolved completely, then folding in a large container of Cool Whip until the mixture was fluffy and uniform. The filling was spooned into a pre-made graham cracker crust, smoothed on top, and chilled in the refrigerator for at least 4 hours until set firm enough to slice. The pie was served cold with additional Cool Whip on top, and sometimes garnished with orange zest or a maraschino cherry. The flavor was sweet, tangy, and nostalgic, bringing back childhood memories of summer ice cream trucks. Today, this easy pie has completely vanished from church potlucks, replaced by more sophisticated desserts that require actual baking skills and expensive ingredients. These 10 church potluck desserts, from sour cream raisin pie to orange creamsicle Kool-Aid pie, were the most beloved desserts that filled fellowship hall tables throughout the 1950s through 1980s. Today, all 10 have completely vanished, replaced by store-bought cakes and modern convenience. Let's continue discovering 20 more before they're completely forgotten. Lemon chiffon pie was the elegant, cloud-like dessert that graced church potluck tables throughout the 1950s through 1970s, featuring a fluffy lemon filling made with gelatin and beaten egg whites that created an impossibly light texture. Country grandmas made this by cooking egg yolks with sugar, lemon juice, lemon zest, and water in a double boiler until the mixture thickened into a custard, then dissolving unflavored gelatin in the hot mixture. Once the custard cooled to room temperature, stiffly beaten egg whites were folded in gently to create the signature airy chiffon texture that gave the pie its name. The filling was poured into a pre-baked pie shell or graham cracker crust and chilled for several hours until set firm enough to slice cleanly. The pie was often topped with sweetened whipped cream and thin curls of lemon zest for an elegant presentation at church suppers. The combination of tart lemon flavor and light, mousse-like texture made it a refreshing dessert after heavy potluck meals, and church ladies competed to see whose chiffon pie was the lightest and most perfectly set. Today, lemon chiffon pie has completely vanished from church tables as gelatin-based desserts fell out of fashion, and the technique of folding beaten egg whites has been largely forgotten by younger generations. Chocolate Lush was the decadent layered dessert that became a church potluck sensation throughout the 1980s, featuring 4 rich layers: an Oreo cookie crust, a cream cheese layer, a chocolate pudding layer, and a Cool Whip topping studded with more crushed Oreos. Country grandmas made this in clear glass 13 by 9 dishes, so the beautiful chocolate layers showed through the sides, and it was always one of the first desserts to disappear from the table. The bottom crust was made from crushed Oreo cookies mixed with melted butter and pressed firmly into the pan, creating a dark, crunchy foundation. The second layer was softened cream cheese, beaten with powdered sugar, and Cool Whip until light and fluffy, spread carefully over the cookie crust. The third layer was chocolate instant pudding, mixed with cold milk until thick and creamy, spread over the cream cheese layer. The final layer was more Cool Whip, spread generously on top and garnished with additional crushed Oreos sprinkled across the surface. The dessert had to be refrigerated for at least 4 hours before serving to let all the layers set properly, and cutting perfect squares that showed all 4 distinct layers was considered a mark of skill. Today, Chocolate Lush has largely vanished from church potlucks. It's replaced by simpler desserts that don't require the time and layering technique this classic demanded. Cherry cream cheese pie was the simple yet elegant no-bake dessert that appeared at church potlucks throughout the 1960s and 1970s, featuring a smooth cream cheese filling topped with ruby red cherry pie, filling in a graham cracker crust. Country grandmas loved this recipe because it required no baking beyond the optional crust preparation, came together in minutes, and always impressed with its beautiful presentation. The filling was made by beating softened cream cheese with powdered sugar and vanilla extract until completely smooth and fluffy, then folding in whipped cream or Cool Whip to lighten the texture. The mixture was spread into a graham cracker crust, either store-bought or homemade from crushed graham crackers mixed with melted butter and sugar, and smoothed on top. A can of cherry pie filling was spooned over the cream cheese layer, covering it completely with the glossy red cherries that made the pie instantly recognizable across any fellowship hall. The pie was chilled in the refrigerator for several hours until the cream cheese layer set firm enough to slice cleanly, revealing the pretty pink and white layers beneath the cherry topping. The contrast of tangy cream cheese and sweet cherries made every bite perfectly balanced. Today, cherry cream cheese pie has completely disappeared from church potlucks, considered too simple and old-fashioned for modern dessert tables that favor more elaborate creations. Banana split pie was the frozen dessert that brought ice cream parlor magic to church potlucks throughout the 1970s and 1980s, featuring all the classic banana split components layered in a graham cracker crust and served in neat, sliceable portions. Country grandmas made this by pressing a graham cracker crust into a pie pan, then layering sliced fresh bananas across the bottom. The next layer was a mixture of softened cream cheese beaten with powdered sugar until fluffy, spread over the bananas to create a creamy base. Crushed pineapple, drained well to remove excess juice, was spread over the cream cheese layer, followed by sliced strawberries arranged in a pretty pattern. The entire pie was topped with Cool Whip spread thick and smooth, then drizzled with chocolate syrup in a decorative pattern and sprinkled with chopped peanuts and maraschino cherries, just like a real banana split. The pie was frozen solid, then removed from the freezer about 15 minutes before serving so it could soften just enough to slice cleanly without falling apart. Each slice revealed all the colorful layers, and the combination of cold, creamy filling with fresh fruit and chocolate made it a refreshing dessert for summer church picnics. Today, banana split pie has vanished from fellowship halls as frozen desserts became less practical to transport to potlucks. No-bake turtle pie was the rich, candy-inspired dessert that dominated church potlucks throughout the 1970s and 1980s, featuring layers of chocolate, caramel, pecans, and cream cheese that mimicked the popular turtle candy. Country grandmas made this by starting with an Oreo cookie crust pressed into a pie pan, then layering the bottom with whole or chopped pecans that were sometimes toasted first for extra flavor. The filling was made from softened cream cheese beaten with powdered sugar and cocoa powder until smooth and chocolatey, then folded with Cool Whip to create a light, mousse-like texture. This chocolate cream cheese mixture was spread over the pecan layer, smoothed on top, and chilled until firm. The finishing touch was jarred caramel sauce drizzled generously over the top in a decorative pattern, with additional chopped pecans and sometimes chocolate chips sprinkled across the surface. The pie was kept refrigerated until serving time, and each slice revealed the beautiful layers of chocolate filling, crunchy pecans, and gooey caramel that made it taste exactly like biting into a turtle candy. The combination of textures and flavors made this pie irresistible, and it was always one of the first desserts to disappear from the table. Today, no-bake turtle pie has completely vanished from church potlucks, as homemade caramel became less common and the layering technique fell out of practice. These 5 desserts, lemon chiffon pie, chocolate lush, cherry cream cheese pie, banana split pie, and no-bake turtle pie, showcased country grandma's creativity with no-bake and layered desserts throughout the 1950s through 1980s. Each required patience and technique to create perfect layers. Today, all 5 have vanished from church potlucks, replaced by simpler, store-bought options. Ambrosia salad was the sweet fruit and marshmallow dessert that appeared at every church potluck throughout the 1960s and 1970s, straddling the line between salad and dessert in that uniquely mid-century way. Country grandmas made this by combining canned fruit cocktail drained well, miniature marshmallows, sweetened shredded coconut, mandarin orange segments, and maraschino cherries cut in half in a large bowl. The binding ingredient was sour cream mixed with a little powdered sugar, though some grandmas used Cool Whip or a mixture of both for a lighter texture. Everything was folded together gently so the fruit stayed intact and the marshmallows didn't dissolve. Then the salad was chilled in the refrigerator for several hours or overnight so the flavors could meld and the marshmallows could soften slightly. The finished salad was served in a cut glass bowl that showed off the colorful fruit pieces, and it was always placed on the dessert end of the potluck table rather than with the regular salads, because everyone understood it was really dessert pretending to be virtuous. The combination of sweet fruit, chewy marshmallows, and tangy sour cream created a refreshing contrast that made it perfect for summer church picnics and holiday dinners. Today, Ambrosia salad has been relegated to jokes about retro food and has completely vanished from church potlucks. Lunch Lady Brownies were the thin, fudgy brownies topped with a glossy chocolate frosting that appeared at both school cafeterias and church bake sales throughout the 1960s through 1980s, and country grandmas knew this recipe by heart. These brownies were distinctly different from thick, cake-like brownies. They were baked in a large sheet pan, creating a thin layer with a dense, fudgy texture and slightly crispy edges. The batter was made from butter, sugar, cocoa powder, eggs, flour, and vanilla mixed quickly and spread thin in a greased jelly roll pan. After baking for just 15 to 20 minutes until barely set, the brownies were cooled completely before the signature frosting was applied. The frosting was made on the stovetop by melting butter with cocoa powder and milk, bringing it to a boil, then removing from heat and stirring in powdered sugar and vanilla until smooth and glossy. This warm frosting was poured over the cooled brownies and spread quickly before it set, creating that distinctive shiny chocolate coating that crackled slightly when you cut through it. The brownies were cut into perfect rectangles, and the combination of fudgy brownie and sweet frosting made them absolutely irresistible at church bake sales, where they sold out first every time. Today, these classic lunch lady brownies have been replaced by thick bakery brownies and have vanished from church fundraisers. Zucchini bars were the clever way church grandmas used up abundant summer garden zucchini throughout the 1970s and 1980s, transforming the vegetable into a moist, spice cake-like bar topped with tangy cream cheese frosting. Country grandmas made these by shredding fresh zucchini, skin and all, and squeezing out some of the excess moisture, then mixing it with flour, sugar, vegetable oil, eggs, cinnamon, nutmeg, baking soda, and salt to create a batter similar to carrot cake. The batter was spread into a greased 13 by 9 pan and baked until a toothpick came out clean and the top was golden brown. After cooling completely, the bars were topped with a thick cream cheese frosting made from softened cream cheese, butter, powdered sugar, and vanilla beaten until fluffy and spread evenly across the top. The finished bars were cut into squares, and the combination of moist, spiced cake and tangy frosting made them taste more like carrot cake than anything containing zucchini, which was exactly the point. These bars were always the first to disappear from the church potluck dessert table, and children who normally refused vegetables happily ate multiple squares without ever knowing they contained zucchini. Today, zucchini bars have largely vanished from church potlucks as home gardens became less common. Pecan tassis were the delicate miniature pecan pies that appeared at church teas, holiday potlucks, and wedding receptions throughout the 1950s through 1970s, and making them properly required patience and skill. Country grandmas made these by preparing a cream cheese pastry dough that was chilled, then pressed into mini muffin tins to create tiny pie shells. The dough was made from softened cream cheese, butter, and flour worked together until smooth, creating a rich, tender pastry that melted in your mouth. The filling was similar to pecan pie filling but scaled down: brown sugar, butter, eggs, vanilla, and a pinch of salt mixed together. Then a few pecan halves were placed in each tiny shell before the filling was spooned in carefully to avoid overfilling. The tassis baked until the filling puffed up slightly and the pastry turned golden brown around the edges. Then they were cooled completely before being removed from the tins. Each tassie was a perfect two-bite dessert that looked elegant on serving platters and was easy to eat while standing and socializing at church gatherings. The combination of buttery cream cheese pastry and sweet pecan filling made them irresistible, and church ladies always made dozens knowing they would disappear quickly. Today, pecan tassis have vanished from most church potlucks as the time-intensive process has been replaced by easier cookie recipes. Iced oatmeal cookies were the soft, cake-like cookies topped with a sweet vanilla glaze that appeared at church bake sales and potluck cookie trays throughout the 1950s through 1970s, and they were completely different from crispy oatmeal cookies. Country grandmas made these by creaming butter with both white and brown sugar, then beating in eggs, vanilla, and molasses for deep flavor and dark color. Old-fashioned rolled oats were mixed with flour, baking soda, cinnamon, nutmeg, and salt, and then stirred into the wet ingredients to create a thick, sticky dough. The cookies were dropped by spoonfuls onto baking sheets and baked until just set and barely golden around the edges. Overbaking made them hard instead of soft. The real signature was the glaze: powdered sugar mixed with milk and vanilla, stirred until smooth and thin enough to drizzle, but thick enough to set into a crackly white coating. While the cookies were still slightly warm, the glaze was spooned over the top of each one, spreading naturally as it dripped down the sides. As the glaze dried, it formed a sweet, crispy shell over the soft cookie underneath. Today, iced oatmeal cookies have completely vanished from church bake sales, replaced by chocolate chip cookies and other more popular varieties that don't require the extra step of glazing. This 1970s church favorite became the go-to dessert for busy country grandmas who needed to feed a crowd without spending hours in the kitchen. The name came from the revolutionary method. Dump a layer of fresh or frozen strawberries into a greased 9x13 pan, sprinkle an entire box of dry strawberry or white cake, mix evenly over the fruit, dot the top with thin pats of cold butter, and bake at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 45 minutes until bubbly and golden. No mixing, no bowls, no beaters, just 3 simple layers that transformed into magic in the oven. As the cake baked, The butter melted down through the dry mix, creating a crispy, golden crust on top, while the strawberries bubbled up from below, releasing their sweet juices into the cake. The result was a dessert that looked and tasted like it took hours to make, with a crispy top, a tender cake middle, and a layer of hot, syrupy strawberries on the bottom. Country grandmas served it warm, scooped into bowls with vanilla ice cream melting over the top, and it disappeared within minutes at every church potluck, bake sale, and Sunday dinner. The beauty of dump cake was its versatility. Grandmas could use any fruit they had on hand: cherry, blueberry, peach, apple, or mixed berries. Some added chopped pecans or walnuts between the fruit and cake mix for extra crunch. Others used lemon-lime soda instead of butter for a lighter, fluffier texture. The technique was so simple that even kids could make it, and it became a staple in church cookbooks throughout the 1970s and 1980s. But as convenience desserts like brownie mixes and frozen pies took over, the dump cake method faded away. Today's cooks buy pre-made cobbler mixes or boxed dump cake kits that cost 5 times as much and taste half as good. The original strawberry dump cake, made with real butter, real fruit, and a simple box of cake mix, has been completely forgotten. You country grandmas knew that the secret to a great church dessert wasn't fancy ingredients or complicated techniques. It was knowing how to make something delicious, fast, and foolproof that everyone would love. That wisdom vanished along with the recipe. This summer, church social staple was the elegant cousin of the famous pineapple upside-down cake, but it has been completely forgotten by modern bakers. Country grandmas made this stunning dessert when wild blueberries were in season, creating a jewel-toned masterpiece that looked like it came from a fancy bakery, but required nothing more than a cast-iron skillet and simple pantry ingredients. The method started with melting a 1/4 cup of butter in the bottom of a 10-inch cast-iron skillet, then sprinkling 1/2 cup of brown sugar evenly over the melted butter to create a caramel base. Fresh blueberries, 2 to 3 cups, were arranged in a single layer over the brown sugar, packed tightly so every slice would have plenty of fruit. Then a simple yellow cake batter, made from scratch with flour, sugar, eggs, milk, butter, baking powder, and vanilla, was poured carefully over the berries, spreading gently to the edges without disturbing the fruit layer below. The skillet went into a 350-degree Fahrenheit oven for 45 to 50 minutes, baking until the cake was golden and a toothpick came out clean. The hardest part was waiting for it to cool for 10 minutes before the big reveal, placing a serving plate over the skillet and flipping it in one confident motion. When the skillet was lifted away, the caramelized brown sugar glaze coated the top, and the blueberries, now soft, syrupy, and glossy, formed a gorgeous purple crown over the golden cake. The blueberries would burst during baking, releasing their juices into the brown sugar glaze and creating a sweet tart sauce that soaked into the tender cake below. Country grandmas served it warm with fresh whipped cream or vanilla ice cream, and it was always the centerpiece of the summer church dessert table. The combination of buttery caramel, tart blueberries, and moist cake was irresistible. Some grandmas added a pinch of cinnamon or lemon zest to the batter for extra flavor. Others used a mix of blueberries and blackberries for a deeper color. But as fresh berries became more expensive and convenience desserts took over, blueberry upside-down cake vanished from church potlucks and community cookbooks. Pineapple upside-down cake survived because canned pineapple was cheap and available year-round, but the blueberry version, which required fresh, seasonal fruit and a little more patience, disappeared entirely. Today's cooks have never even heard of it, and that beautiful summer tradition is lost forever. This no-bake 1960s church pie was the ultimate crowd pleaser, disappearing faster than any other dessert on the potluck table. Country grandmas loved it because it was rich, creamy, impressive-looking, and required no oven, perfect for hot summer months when turning on the stove was unbearable. The pie started with a simple graham cracker crust, made by crushing a sleeve of graham crackers, and mixing the crumbs with melted butter and sugar, and pressing the mixture firmly into a 9-inch pie pan. The crust was chilled while the filling was prepared, allowing it to set firm enough to hold the creamy layers. The filling was the star. Country grandmas beat together 8 ounces of softened cream cheese, 1 cup of creamy peanut butter, 1 cup of powdered sugar, and a teaspoon of vanilla extract until smooth and fluffy. Then they folded in 1 cup of heavy cream that had been whipped to stiff peaks, creating a light mousse-like texture that was rich but not too heavy. The filling was spread into the chilled crust, smoothed with a spatula, and refrigerated for at least 4 hours, or overnight, until firm and sliceable. The finishing touches made it unforgettable. Some grandmas topped it with chocolate curls, made by shaving a chocolate bar with a vegetable peeler. Others drizzled melted chocolate or hot fudge sauce in a decorative pattern across the top. Some sprinkled crushed peanuts or toffee bits for crunch. The pie was always served cold, sliced thin because it was so rich, and it never lasted long. The combination of sweet, salty peanut butter, tangy cream cheese, and crunchy graham crust was addictive. Country grandmas made this for every church supper, birthday party, and holiday gathering throughout the 1960s and 1970s. It was one of the first desserts to use cream cheese as a base for no-bake pies, a technique that later inspired cheesecake bars and layered desserts. But as convenience products flooded the market, the original recipe was replaced by shortcuts: instant vanilla pudding mixed with peanut butter and Cool Whip, spread into a store-bought crust. These modern versions are pale imitations, chalky, artificial tasting, and lacking the creamy richness of the original. The real peanut butter pie, I made with cream cheese, real whipped cream, and patience, has been completely forgotten. Country grandmas knew that taking the time to whip real cream and beat the filling until fluffy made all the difference, but that knowledge vanished along with the recipe. This Southern church classic dates back to the 1800s and was once as common on dessert tables as chess pie or pecan pie, but today it has nearly vanished from modern kitchens. Our country grandmas made buttermilk pie because it was a miracle of thrift and simplicity, using nothing more than pantry staples like buttermilk, sugar, eggs, butter, flour, and vanilla to create a custardy, tangy, sweet filling that was absolutely unforgettable. The pie started with a flaky, homemade pie crust, rolled thin, and fitted into a deep 9-inch pie pan with crimped edges. The filling was whisked together in one bowl, 3 eggs beaten until frothy, 1½ cups of sugar, a ½ a cup of melted butter, 3 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, 1 cup of buttermilk, 1 tablespoon of fresh lemon juice, and a teaspoon of vanilla extract. The mixture was thin and pourable, but as it baked, the eggs and flour set into a smooth custardy filling with a golden top. The pie baked at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 45 to 50 minutes until the center was just set and the top was lightly browned. As it cooled, the filling firmed up into a sliceable custard with a texture somewhere between chess pie and cheesecake, dense but not heavy, tangy but not sour, sweet but not cloying. Country grandmas served it at room temperature, sliced thin, and it was always one of the first pies to disappear at church potlucks. The tangy buttermilk gave it a unique flavor that balanced the sweetness perfectly, and the simplicity meant every bite tasted clean and pure. Some grandmas added a pinch of nutmeg or a teaspoon of lemon zest for extra brightness. Others topped it with fresh berries or a dollop of whipped cream, but the pie was delicious on its own, needing no garnish or adornment. This spring, church dessert was the ruby-crowned sister of pineapple and blueberry upside-down cakes, But unlike its more famous cousins, it has been completely forgotten by modern bakers. Country grandmas made this stunning cake when fresh strawberries came into season, creating a dessert that looked like a celebration and tasted like springtime on a plate. The method was similar to other upside-down cakes, but required a little extra care because strawberries are more delicate and release more juice than pineapple or blueberries. Grandmas started by melting a quarter cup of butter in the bottom of a 9 by 13 baking pan or a cast iron skillet, then sprinkling half a cup of brown sugar or white sugar evenly over the melted butter to create a caramel base. Fresh strawberries, hulled, halved, and patted dry, were arranged cut side down in a tight, decorative pattern over the sugar layer. Some grandmas created rows, others made concentric circles, and the most artistic arranged them in a flower pattern. The key was packing them tightly, so every slice would have plenty of fruit. Then, a simple white or yellow cake batter was poured carefully over the strawberries, spreading gently to the edges without disturbing the fruit below. The pan went into a 350 degrees Fahrenheit oven for 35 to 40 minutes, baking until the cake was golden and a toothpick came out clean. The moment of truth came when the cake cooled for 10 minutes, then was inverted onto a serving platter in one confident flip. When the pan was lifted, the caramelized sugar glaze coated the top, and the strawberries, now soft, glossy, and deep red, formed a gorgeous crown that looked almost too beautiful to eat. The strawberries released their juices during baking, soaking into the cake and creating pockets of sweet, fruity flavor in every bite. Country grandmas served it warm or at room temperature, sometimes with whipped cream or vanilla ice cream. These 5 desserts, strawberry dump cake, blueberry upside-down cake, peanut butter pie, buttermilk pie, and strawberry upside-down cake, were church potluck legends that required patience, fresh ingredients, and country grandma's careful hands. Today, they've been replaced by boxed mixes and frozen pies, and these beautiful from-scratch traditions are now completely forgotten. This 1970s church potluck surprise was the unexpected star of summer bake sales and Sunday socials, proving that country grandmas could turn even the most humble garden vegetable into an irresistible dessert. Zucchini bars were born out of necessity. By late July, every country garden was overflowing with zucchini, and grandmas needed creative ways to use up the surplus before it went to waste. These spiced sheet cake bars looked and tasted like carrot cake, but used shredded zucchini instead, creating a moist, tender crumb that stayed fresh for days. The batter started with 2 cups of grated zucchini, squeezed dry in a clean kitchen towel to remove excess moisture, mixed with 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 1½ cups of sugar, ½ a cup of vegetable oil, 3 eggs, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of salt, ½ a teaspoon of ground cloves, and ½ a teaspoon of baking powder. Some grandmas added a cup of chopped walnuts or pecans for crunch, and others stirred in ½ a cup of raisins or dried cranberries for extra sweetness. The batter was thick and fragrant with warm spices. Shish poured into a greased 9 by 13 pan and baked at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 35 to 40 minutes until a toothpick came out clean. While the bars cooled, grandmas prepared the cream cheese frosting, 8 ounces of softened cream cheese beaten with ½ a cup of softened butter, 2 cups of powdered sugar, and a teaspoon of vanilla extract until light and fluffy. The frosting was spread over the cooled bars, smoothed with a spatula, and the pan was refrigerated until the frosting set firm. Then, the bars were cut into squares and served chilled, revealing a moist, spiced cake with a tangy, creamy topping that tasted exactly like carrot cake. The zucchini was completely undetectable. These soft, chewy 1960s church cookies were a staple at every bake sale, funeral reception, and Sunday coffee hour. But today, they've been completely replaced by plain oatmeal cookies and the iced version has vanished. Country grandmas made these cookies by the hundred, baking them just until set so they stayed tender and soft, then brushing them with a thin powdered sugar glaze while they were still warm. As the cookies cooled, the icing hardened into a sweet, crackly shell that added just enough sweetness without overpowering the warm spice and oatmeal flavor underneath. The cookie dough started with creaming together 1 cup of softened butter, 1 cup of brown sugar, and half a cup of white sugar until light and fluffy. 2 eggs and 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract were beaten in, followed by 1½ cups of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, half a teaspoon of salt, and 3 cups of old-fashioned rolled oats. Some grandmas added half a cup of raisins or chopped walnuts for extra texture. The dough was scooped onto greased baking sheets in rounded tablespoons, flattened slightly with the bottom of a glass, and then baked at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 to 12 minutes, just until the edges were golden, but the centers still looked slightly underdone. This was the secret to keeping them soft and chewy instead of hard and crunchy. While the cookies were still hot on the baking sheet, grandmas brushed them with a simple glaze made from 1 cup of powdered sugar mixed with 2 tablespoons of milk and half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. The glaze soaked into the warm cookies slightly, then set into a thin, unsweet shell as they cooled on wire racks. This late summer church dessert was a rare and beautiful treat that appeared only when Italian plums ripened in August and September, and today it has been completely forgotten by modern bakers. Country grandmas made plum crisp the same way they made apple crisp: sliced fruit tossed with sugar and spices, topped with a buttery oat crumble, and baked until bubbly and golden. But plums created a completely different flavor profile that was more complex, more sophisticated, and more memorable than any other fruit crisp. Italian plums, also called prune plums, were the variety grandmas used: small, oval, deep purple fruits with golden flesh that became incredibly sweet and jammy when baked. The dessert started with 4 cups of sliced Italian plums, halved, pitted, and cut into thick wedges, tossed with half a cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, a pinch of nutmeg, and a tablespoon of fresh lemon juice to brighten the flavor. The fruit mixture was spread in a buttered 9 by 13 baking dish, creating an even layer. The crumble topping was made by combining 1 cup of old-fashioned rolled oats, 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour, 3/4 cup of brown sugar, half a teaspoon of cinnamon, and a pinch of salt, then cutting in half a cup of cold butter until the mixture resembled coarse crumbs. Some grandmas added chopped pecans or walnuts for extra crunch. The crumble was scattered evenly over the fruit, covering every inch, and the dish went into a 375 degrees Fahrenheit oven for 35 to 40 minutes, baking until the topping was golden brown and the fruit juices were bubbling up around the edges. The smell was intoxicating, sweet, spiced, buttery, with a hint of tartness from the plums. Country grandmas served it warm, scooped into bowls with vanilla ice cream or fresh whipped cream, and it was always gone within minutes. This Ohio church potluck candy was a Christmas and bake sale staple throughout the Midwest in the 1960s and 1970s, but today it has been almost entirely replaced by store-bought peanut butter cups. Country grandmas made Buckeyes by the hundreds every December, rolling peanut butter balls by hand, dipping them in melted chocolate, and leaving a small circle of peanut butter exposed to resemble the nut of the Ohio Buckeye tree. The candy was named after the state tree of Ohio, and it became a regional tradition that spread through church cookbooks and community bake sales across the Midwest and South. The recipe started with mixing together 1½ cups of creamy peanut butter, half a cup of softened butter, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and 3 to 4 cups of powdered sugar until a stiff, moldable dough formed. The dough was thick enough to roll into balls without sticking to your hands. If it was too soft, grandmas added more powdered sugar. If it was too stiff, they added a tablespoon of milk. The dough was rolled into 1-inch balls, about the size of a large marble, and placed on a baking sheet lined with wax paper. Then the balls were refrigerated for at least 2 hours until firm and cold, which made them easier to dip without falling apart. The chocolate coating was made by melting 12 ounces of semi-sweet chocolate chips with 2 tablespoons of shortening or butter in a double boiler, stirring until smooth and glossy. Each peanut butter ball was skewered with a toothpick and dipped into the melted chocolate, leaving a small circle on top uncovered. The toothpick was removed, the chocolate-covered candy was placed back on the wax paper, and the small hole was smoothed over with a fingertip. The candies were refrigerated again until the chocolate set firm and shiny. The result was a candy that looked exactly like a Buckeye nut, smooth, dark, shiny chocolate with a golden brown circle of peanut butter peeking through. This 1980s layered dessert was the ultimate church potluck showstopper, with 4 distinct layers that looked impressive, tasted incredible, and fed a crowd from a single 9-by-13 pan. Plus, country grandmas called it by many names: chocolate lush, better than Essex cake, Robert Redford dessert, chocolate delight, or simply Lush dessert. But no matter what it was called, it always disappeared first. The dessert was made entirely in advance, chilled overnight, and served in neat squares that revealed all 4 beautiful layers. The first layer was a pecan shortbread crust, 1 cup of all-purpose flour, half a cup of melted butter, and half a cup of finely chopped pecans pressed firmly into the bottom of a greased 9-by-13 pan and baked at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 minutes until golden. The crust cooled completely before the next layer was added. The second layer was a sweet cream cheese mixture, 8 ounces of softened cream cheese, beaten with 1 cup of powdered sugar and 1 cup of Cool Whip or whipped cream until light and fluffy, spread evenly over the cooled crust. The third layer was chocolate pudding, 2 boxes of instant chocolate pudding mix whisked with 3 cups of. The fourth and final layer was a blanket of whipped topping, either homemade whipped cream or Cool Whip, spread over the pudding and sprinkled with shaved chocolate, crushed pecans, or mini chocolate chips for garnish. The entire pan was covered with plastic wrap and refrigerated overnight, allowing the layers to set firm and the flavors to meld together. When served, each square revealed 4 perfect layers: crunchy pecan crust, tangy cream cheese, rich chocolate pudding, and fluffy whipped cream. These 30-old church potluck desserts were more than just recipes. They were the heart of every community gathering, the centerpiece of every Sunday social, and the tradition that brought country families together around shared tables. Our grandmothers didn't just bake these desserts. They poured love, patience, and pride into every layer, every crumble, every frosted square. They knew that a perfectly caramelized upside-down cake or a rich, creamy Lush dessert could turn an ordinary potluck into a celebration, and they took that responsibility seriously. These weren't fancy bakery creations or expensive restaurant desserts. They were humble, honest sweets made from simple ingredients and passed down wisdom. Burnt sugar cake, 7-Up pound cake, Watergate salad, sock-it-to-me cake, chocolate lush, buttermilk pie, strawberry dump cake. Every single one of these desserts told a story of resourcefulness, creativity, and community. But somewhere along the way, we traded those stories for convenience. We replaced hand-whipped cream with Cool Whip, fresh fruit with canned filling, homemade crusts with store-bought shells, and patient layering with boxed mixes. We forgot that the magic wasn't just in the taste, it was in the process, the tradition, the connection. Now these 30 desserts have vanished from our church tables, our family reunions, and our community cookbooks. And with them, we've lost a piece of our heritage. But it's not too late. You can bring these recipes back. You can honor the country grandmas who spent hours in their kitchens creating beauty from nothing. You can teach your children and grandchildren that real desserts take time, love, and care. You can be the one who shows up at the next potluck with a lazy daisy cake or a peanut butter pie and reminds everyone what real homemade tastes like. These recipes aren't just desserts. They're history, tradition, and love baked into every bite. They represent generations of grandmothers who stood in their kitchens, measuring flour with worn hands, creating sweetness from simple ingredients, and bringing joy to fellowship halls across the country. Every Lazy Daisy cake, every burnt sugar cake, every Lane cake told a story of patience, skill, and community. Don't let them disappear forever. Don't let convenience erase what mattered. Bake one, share one, teach one to someone you love. Keep the memory alive. Keep the tradition alive. Keep these church potluck desserts alive before they're gone forever.